for Heffron.
Mr Acting Speaker, I make a contribution to the ICAC and other independent commissions legislation amendment independent funding bill of 2020 and indicate that I will vote in favour of the bill, not just because I'm bound to, not because I think that the bill is perfect, but the bill clearly seeks to address a considerable concern that goes all the way back to the executive government through the Treasury trying to usurp this House and the intentions of this House in breach of the doctrine of separation of powers. A culture has developed in this parliament for some decades where governments of the day being answerable to this House only apply in name only. The New South Wales Constitution that requires this House to allocate funding for the ordinary services of government is completely usurped by the executive government, not because they have necessarily a political mandate or because they have a philosophical strategy, because of absolute belligerence through Treasury boffins that their way is the only way, which then usurps proper public policy. Now, whilst everybody is focused on the Independent Commission Against Corruption and its funding, one should note, because that's what one expects from an eminent member of the other place, the Honourable Robert Borsak, is that his bill is designed to provide a mechanism of funding not just for that commission, but also for the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission, the New South Wales Electoral Commission and the Ombudsman's Office. And each of those integrity agencies have been starved for funding in some ways. Some of that funding has manifested itself at the last state election when all of us that are members of this House saw these huge queues and people waiting to get into polling booths because there wasn't enough staff and money allocated to the Electoral Commission, which I think is disgraceful. Anything that inhibits people's easy participation to democracy is terrible or disgraceful. Nobody willingly, a member of this House, would have been cutting funding that would have impacted upon the queues at polling booths. But we as members of this House are not part of the executive, are just marginalised to Treasury boffins, which then impacts upon the statutory independence and operations of the Electoral Commission. I just want to address this, I just want to make this point and use the opportunity of this bill to make a point, and that is that this parliament sets up these integrity agencies, sets up independent commissions against corruption, sets up law enforcement conduct commissions, sets up ombudsmans, gives them statutory independence, gives them wide discretion to go and investigate, and then when they don't like the results which are occasioned because they've acted in accordance with the discretions within their act, they then target the individuals. You give ICAC power to investigate certain things and they go and pursue their discretions under the Act, and you don't like the result, you sack Justice Latham as Commissioner by an Act of Parliament. You don't like the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission because former Justice Adams, who's known affectionately as Fatty Adams, you don't like the way in which he's conducting an inquiry because it happened to be embarrassing the police, although he's acting in accordance with the Act. Oh, you just don't renew Justice Adams's contract at the Law Enforcement Commission. Now, so there are problems in adequately funding these agencies. Now, you know, there is an argument, and with great respect to the country's most eminent counsel, Brett Walker, I've seen the advice that he has provided, and there are assertions that ICAC is virtually like a fourth tier of government and it should have its own complete guaranteed funding so it can do whatever it wants to do, so it's not accountable to the Treasurer or the Premier for the allocation of its funding, because they're investigating all these people and therefore they could have their funding restricted to punish them, and they should be given independence. Now, with great respect to Mr Walker and with great respect to a number of other people who are trying to assert that ICAC and these other integrity agencies are not part of the executive branch of government, I say you are wrong. They are, ICAC is an investigator. It is part of the executive branch of government. It has been given statutory independence by Parliament and by this House, as have a number of other organs of the executive branch. Crown prosecutors are given statutory independence in respect of their funding, in respect of their operations. I mean, nobody would want to see funding cut from a Crown prosecutor that stops the ability for people to be fairly prosecuted in this state. Public defenders who represent legally aided people are given statutory independence and are funded via the executive government. The police commissioner has statutory independence, yet he is funded from this Parliament via the executive government. Nobody says the police should be given this guaranteed amount of money every year because otherwise the government will pull money out to stop the police effectively in investigating. However, and the police can certainly investigate a minister or a member of Parliament or anyone for the most minor offences. However, what's been occurring, what's been asked for in respect of these agencies is, in respect of this bill, is that there is a consistent shortfall of funding that does not allow the Parliament's will for the functions of these integrity agencies to operate properly. Now, Parliament set these agencies up and gave them a function, and these agencies themselves are saying we cannot perform the statutory function because we're not getting the funds necessary to perform this function. So either Parliament says, well, don't perform the function and changes or repeals the Act, or Parliament has to provide the funding. But the problem is the practical reality in the way in which this Parliament operates. We might supposed to be providing the funding under the Constitution, but it doesn't work that way because every year the Treasurer comes in, moves the budget gets adopted, gets pushed down the track for a take-note debate, and none of us have a say. None of us have a say. None of us even know when they drop the document in this like they'll do next month, how much money is going to this organisation, and we don't even get a say because we don't even know. We've got to wait for these agencies to complain that they can't discharge their statutory function. So this bill is a product of a frustrated Parliament and a frustrated House of Parliament who are saying clearly by the enactment of this bill, the government who's accountable to this Parliament, you are stopping our agencies that this Parliament set up to perform a particular function. You are stopping them from performing the function Parliament wants them set up because you're not giving them a consistent level of funding. And so that it is the Parliament demanding some level of funding. Now, the government's response was to send it to the Auditor-General. It's the typical government of the day's response when it's getting politically wedged. And that is, you know, you're soft on corruption, you're interfering because you're under the investigation of ICAC and therefore you don't like the results, so you're not giving us any money. And so, you know, we're going to cut the money. That's what the accusation is. Opposition makes that accusation. The government of the day, the Premier says, well, I'll send all these integrity agencies the Auditor-General. Thinking, because every single, as you know, and you would know, Mr Acting Speaker, every single public sector organisation of councils, there's hollow logs or inefficiencies in every corner, expecting somehow or other a report will come out from the Auditor-General saying that the Independent Commission Against Corruption is inefficiently run and not properly accountable for its funds, the Police Integrity Commission not properly run and there's all this wasted money. The Ombudsman won't be properly run because there'll be all that wasted money because, you know, they had all that inquiry going on. And you know what, Mr Acting Speaker? That wasn't the result from the Auditor-General. That was not the result. Mr Acting Speaker, might I have a short extension of time? I won't use the whole time.
Question is the member's time be extended. All of that opinion say aye. Opposed, no. I declare that carried, please.
The Auditor General reported that these agencies, and specifically the Independent Commission Against Corruption, was probably one of the best run financially accountable agencies within the state. I mean, the Auditor General, and as you would know, Mr Acting Speaker, and all members of the House would know, the Auditor General is not backwards in coming forward in criticising public sector organisations and the public service in relation to their efficiency, not frightened of criticising the management by the government of their major political infrastructure operations, not scared at all. So they certainly wouldn't be scared of criticising ICAC on the basis that they think ICAC might investigate the Auditor General in some sort of quid pro quo. They were probably the most efficient statutory organisation in the state in terms of the allocation of funds. So it's really backfired on the government of the day. So you know, really, the Auditor General has given the government, in her report, a way forward in how various options into how these organisations, one, could be funded to show that there is some independence from executive government. The Auditor General has shown the way forward. The Auditor General is not taking away Parliament's ability to fund that organisation, because it's up to us or the Constitution. It's also up to this Parliament to hold the executive government to account as to how that money is spent. So the Auditor General understands that and is not trying to set up some other branch of the Constitution. Has found a way forward to ensure that there is executive branch accountability to this House, and there is proper funding under the Constitution to these integrity organisations that this Parliament wants operating on an independent basis, unaffected by interference by the executive. That's the way forward. Now, you know, my learned friend, the member for Ku-ring-gai, an eminent silk, whose views I respect. I've listened to his contribution, and I say the bill might not be perfect, but what else are the Houses of Parliament to do when there is no movement from the executive government, with all the resources of the government, with access to the Parliamentary Council, with access to the Treasury and the budget, with access to the Crown Solicitors and the Solicitor General, with an Auditor General's recommendation, with all those resources available to the government, they choose to do nothing, and the Parliament responds with a bill, the best it can do to try and address a significant issue in relation to integrity agencies who themselves say they can't operate in accordance with Parliament's will because they're not being funded to do what Parliament wants them to do. And it's for that reason that I and the opposition support the bill, commend the bill to the House, and commend the Honourable Robert Borsak for being able to steer it through the other place.
The question is that the